Hi everyone, it's the Lone Wolf once again. Welcome back to the channel. Firstly, I'd like to thank all of the new subs. I really appreciate you making the commitment to follow my work and hope you continue to find some value here. I was recently listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, 2 episodes featuring Henry Rollins, and one discussion segment in particular that really stood out to me. I must have listened to it like 30 times in the last month or so. Now, Henry is perhaps one of the closest things to a Renaissance man out there at the moment. And his lifestyle is the essence of a lone wolf, man going his own way type. He is an accomplished actor. I recall him playing a villain in Sons of Anarchy a few years ago. He's a spoken word artist. He was the lead vocalist for his Heroes, the hardcore punk band Black Flag in the early 1980s, before going on to front his own solo band. He also set up his own publishing company and record label. And he's been a radio host from time to time as well. So there's almost a polymath type quality to him. Definitely a Renaissance man. There is certainly almost a Bruce Dickinson type vibe about him. And any of you, I'm sure if you're familiar with him, then you can understand that comparison. But he's got many different pursuits and career strands, and I find that a very admirable quality to emulate. He is never married, he has no children, and he has eschewed all forms of relationships with women as he views himself as incompatible with that particular way of life. I've included a clip of the segment in question where Henry explains to Joe about his lifestyle and what makes him tick. Henry's example serves to illustrate the value of a positive male role model in a young man's life. In his formative years, he was raised by a single mother, and he suffered from depression and low self-esteem. It was at an all-male naval prep school in Potomac, Maryland, where Henry developed his strong work ethic and sense of discipline, no doubt due to the influence of many of the World War II, Korea and Vietnam War veterans that taught at the place. He befriended a teacher, Mr. Pepperman, a lumberjack of a Vietnam vet who introduced him to weight training, calling him a skinny little F-word. I'm sure you know which one I mean. He got Henry to engage in the compound lifts, taking some weights home that he could barely carry. And all of this formed the genesis of Henry's relationship with the iron. He began doing weights at home and was forbidden from looking at himself in the mirror from autumn to Christmas, and was not allowed to tell anyone what he was doing. He dutifully followed Mr. Pepperman's instructions more intently than anything he had ever covered at school. At Christmas, Henry saw that he had put on 25 pounds of muscle, which gave him huge confidence and showed him for the first time that he had the power to change things in his life. He could feel the power inside his body growing, the definition of his chest and biceps changing. His sense of self was now established, and an incredible lesson was learned. This example shows the value of positive reinforcement, even just a little bit of it. Men often need building up from scratch, their confidence, given the amount of poison and toxic BS that gets ladled into their ear from the mainstream culture. In contrast, women tend to be built up too much with all of the free adulation and validation they get these days, especially on social media. This early episode helped forge Henry's identity, resilience and self-respect at a crucial time in his life, and was more input than Henry's birth father had ever given him. Nothing comes without work and a little bit of pain. But back to the Rogan podcast. Henry states that his underlying motivation for his insane work ethic and grind is vengeance, and I realised that a lot of what underpins my own philosophy in life aligns with Henry's. I wouldn't go so far as to describe the mentality as vengeance, but I certainly empathise with his comments. For example, my own goals, objectives and quest for success is at least in part driven by a will to prove people wrong. Whichever parent slighted me, former friends that abandoned me, girls that rejected me, teachers that doubted me, bosses or co-workers that irked me, and so on and so on. In my own case, I would say that it's less vengeance or retribution, it's more subversion or refutation, and I'm not completely obsessed with that thought process. Yes, I do have Facebook that I use sparingly, mainly to see where people from that formative time in my life are today, and also so that they can see me, where I'm living, what I'm doing, so they can see me chasing excellence around the world. I may have mentioned a few videos ago that a girl I was obsessed with in school added me on Facebook a couple of weeks back, and she looks totally busted up. Part of me was almost satisfied by that, the fact she can see how my life has developed over the last decade and a half. So Facebook does have its somewhat limited uses. The bottom line, though, is that I do this for me and nobody else. You can make the assumption that I do it for my immediate family too, parents and siblings, but the foremost reason for chasing excellence is for me. Nobody's going to give you anything for free in this life. You have to go out there and earn it. That includes respect, admiration, virtue. It all has to be acquired. That's not to say I'll step on people's toes or steal to get to where I'm going. I would never do that. I would never slight somebody that didn't have it coming to them. But within my almost libertarian framework, nothing is going to stop me from getting to where I want to be. I owe it to myself. I think there are a lot of men, certainly, that can benefit from this worldview. Henry's motivation stems from his minimum wage job working at Häagen-Dazs in Washington, D.C., and knowing that had it not been for his big break in 1981, getting the gig with his hero's Black Flag, he could very well go back to that life because that's where he's from, the working class environment. So he's hungry and will work at any hour, take any job, adding more and more strings to his bow. Mine is working in a warehouse at 19 years old, seeing people who had been at the same company for 30 years and despised their jobs, but couldn't leave as they were trapped by the salary, their family's dependency on their income, or were just too scared to try something new. They were afraid of the unknown. So what motivates you? First and foremost, you should chase dreams, goals and ambitions, not women. The women will come along later if you have your head screwed on right. It's all transitory nonsense. The work is the most important thing above all others, forging out your niche, where you belong in the world and your identity within it. What does your life mean overall? In this world, unless you're a 9 or 10 girl in her early 20s, nobody's going to give you jack. No free pass, no free entry to clubs, paid trips to Dubai, millions of people liking your photos because of how hot you are. That's it. No. As men, we have to build value over time, and it's a slow burn. Indeed, it can be as late as our 40s and 50s until we start to see returns. But these returns can be exponential. Remember, men age like fine wine. If you do the fundamentals like eat well, train, build yourself, take care of business, you'll be fine. You can't chase excellence while trying to balance the complexities and baggage of a live-in relationship, or at the very least it makes it extremely difficult. It's hard to stay on focus. As Henry says on Joe Rogan, you can't tell a girl you're dating that your plans for Friday evening are to sit and watch him write for 4 hours. He has the maturity of understanding and resolute focus on his goals to be able to shun these sort of relationships. He's also spoken about having a monastic obsession, a single-minded focus on attaining excellence, and I think this is crucially important. It warrants reaffirming on a daily basis. So this is what underpins my own motivation. Yes, all of the factors I mentioned earlier, but mainly the ability to one day change mine, my family's and close friends' lives. All of the considerations are not even secondary or tertiary. They are so far down the list, I can't even see them. I hope you found value in that discussion, guys. You've been listening to The Lone Wolf. See you in the next one.